Welcome back. Carter Krishnaiyer here for the Florida Squeeze. Thank you for everybody who has started subscribing to our channel and watching our videos and listening to our content in the last few days. It's much appreciated. I'm joined right now by Ryan Ray, who is the chairman of the Leon County Democratic Party. And Leon County, for those of you who don't know, is where the capital of Florida is, Tallahassee, our state capital. And not only is it our state capital, but it does feature some of the biggest races in the state, down ballot races in the state this year. Probably the most contentious state Senate race in the state, one of the most contentious state House races in the state. Those are two state legislative races, and then also a pretty critical city commission race. So, Ryan, thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. I've been seeing the traction that you've been getting with this content lately, with the videos. Great job. Y'all are really cooking with gas. And, of course, it's always good to be with you, Carter.
Great. Thanks for that, Ryan. Senate District 3, let's get right to it. Corey Simon, the former FSU linebacker, right? He was a linebacker, I think, or was he a lineman?
Yeah, he's like a nose guard or a lineman.
Yeah, he was down lineman. Player. Yeah, so if the former FSU football player is the Republican incumbent in Senate District 3. The Democrats have a star candidate in Darrell Parks, one of the most prominent civil rights attorneys in Florida. In fact, he's one of the most prominent civil rights attorneys in the country, you could argue,
yes.
along with Ben Crump from Tallahassee, right?
He's very well established in the legal community. I think he's a former American Bar Association president, and he's an absolute top shelf recruit for that seat, no question.
Yeah, so what are we looking at in this district so far? Because we've gone through some of the early vote numbers. Leon County performing very well, your county. We've seen drop-offs in some of the rural counties, surprisingly. Suwannee most notably. What's your feeling going into Election Day about that race, and explain why that race is so critical, even from a statewide perspective?
You got it. Well, it's been a long and winding road, Kartik. I'm so glad to talk about this. I'm so glad that we're going to finally put a pin in this seat and get it resolved. So just to really get into it, I helped recruit a candidate for this seat last year, a teachers union leader named Sharia Griffin, just because I was absolutely, just tearing my hair out looking at the seat which Biden carried, which is a long-standing Democratic seat in the legislature. The Senate victory at the time under leader-designate Jason Pizzo did not show much interest in this seat. In fact, preemptively kind of declared defeat and said that, hey, I can kid you, but we're not going to play in this seat. Lo and behold, turns out a little while later, we have Darrell Parks. Like you said, Ben Crump's longtime law partner. Ben Crump, of course, one of the most prominent lawyers of any kind in the entire country, and he has given his full endorsement to Darrell Parks. That is certainly having an impact locally in Gadsden County, the majority county to our west, which is a very, very Democratic stronghold. Parks is looking good there, looking good in Leon, just as it was with Senator Loren Osley, who I have to take a moment to acknowledge was just in an awful bicycling accident the other day. We wish Senator Osley all the best as she recovers. But that this is a seat that has been targeted by a lot of money on both sides. We know that Senate victory for the Republican side literally in their war chest contained about $15 million. That was their commitment to this race. And if you're a North Florida resident, you feel that. Every single person that lives in Tallahassee, and I can only imagine the outlying counties as well, have been targeted. It's become a fact of life. I mean, they're just like, people are bludgeoning their eyeballs out, seeing just ad after ad on television. Not kidding at all, Kartik. Multiple mailers per day. And so it's really been one of the most hard-fought campaigns in the state legislative environment. This is also the 13th seat for Senate Democrats, which would take us out of the superminority. As you know, the Republicans have a supermajority, which allows them to waive the rules, avoid debate, avoid amendments, basically prevent the people that are represented by their senators from really having any effective voice in the legislature. So in many ways, Simon is the guy that keeps some of the extremism protected from scrutiny. So one of the most expensive state legislative races I've ever seen. Extremely negative, extremely nasty. Basically, both of these candidates calling each other foul-mouthed liars, both back and forth. A lot of character attacks on both sides. Corey Simon, who of course is handpicked by Ron DeSantis, and they let him take a walk on one major abortion related piece of legislation. But Corey Simon did vote to ban abortion in other contexts, and the abortion issue, unsurprisingly, has been probably the characterizing, the defining issue of this race. Amendment 4 will probably be supported by at least 65%, I would say, of the people in Senate District 3, certainly in Leon County, probably 70%. So we are looking at a lot of these dynamics all playing out. I think I heard from a person who's involved in consulting world on the Democratic side. They told me that they looked over the summer that it was generic R plus 10 or so. That was their view. It certainly has gotten more. This is back before Kamala Harris. I think it's improved. I think the ground game of Deer Park's campaign has been formidable. I think that he has not stood exactly on parity, but gotten pretty close to it on the air at his general awareness. So I mean, I hate to be glib, but it's really going to turn down. It's going to rely on turnout on election day. The outlying counties, I think the performance in Gadsden and Leon, it looks very promising in the early voting. It's surging late for Democrats and getting even more Democratic than the electorate typically is in Leon and Gadsden. But what the margins are going to be, if he can avoid getting killed in Madison County, Taylor County, Hamilton County, some of the small counties around here, Wakulla, Franklin, if Parks can keep something like parity or within striking distance in those outlying counties, I think he can take it home. And if it gets eaten up out there, I think that will make the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're seeing thus far is rural turnout being sort of along the same trajectory as urban turnout with in-person early voting, which hasn't always been the case in the past. So there seems to be fewer votes potentially for the GOP to get on election day than they've gotten in the past.
That's one thing that we're seeing across the state, isn't it?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And across the country to a degree, right? Maybe you could talk about that. The cannibalization of election day votes for Republicans in early voting. What are you seeing around those lines?
Yeah, that's certainly the case, I think, in Georgia, especially just to the north of us. But when you look at Palm Beach County in South Florida, I think the Democrats may have done such a good job with early voting that they're cannibalizing their election day vote. So it depends on the specific location. But yes, in general, we're seeing more GOP early voting, in-person early voting coming from 4 or 4 super voters, or 3 or 4 super voters as we classify them in the voter file. I do think something that's really apparent and that we talked about a couple times now on this channel is NPA voters who historically have leaned Democratic in Florida anyway. As I mentioned, outside of the 2022 election, before the 2022 election, Democrats had carried NPAs in every single election in Florida, statewide election at the top of the ticket since 2006. 2004 was the last time that before 2022 that the Republican at the top of the ticket, which was George W. Bush, had won a majority of NPA or even just a plurality of NPA votes in Florida. The problem has been the Democrats, despite a registration advantage that whole time, were turning out at much lower rates than the Republicans. This election so far, Democrats are making up a bigger percentage of the electorate than their registration numbers would indicate. Republicans are as well. But what we might be seeing, Ryan, is an NPA surge on election day. And Florida, as we said, the NPAs have always leaned Democratic, 52-48 or 53-47, if you're assigning them on a two-party ratio. Now we have a national trend that indicates from going from 50-50 to they're going to something like 52, 53, 54, maybe even for Harris nationally, which then makes you think Florida might go a little further than even 55 or 56 for the NPAs, thus putting seats like SD3 in serious jeopardy for the Republicans. And on that note,
so you're also seeing a surge at FSU and FAMU compared to 2020 that we're talking like 10, 15, 20% larger. And again, we may be slightly eating into our own E-Day universe there, but I think that the level of enthusiasm and the level of voting versus not voting is very, very promising. And I can assure you that the very high level of NPAs at FAMU and Florida State early voting, and on election day, I think that they'll break for Harris over Trump, 60+% over Trump.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Tallahassee has three major colleges, two of which are major universities. Florida A&M University and Florida State University in Tallahassee. Florida State University, the two-time reigning NCAA women's soccer champions. So a shout out to FSU women's soccer.
Yes. And in a presidential cycle, in a November presidential cycle, the FAMU and FSU votes are absolute just huge weapons, very, very much a critical part of the Democratic backbone of our electorate, and they are coming out this year in a way that we have not seen in the last few cycles.
Okay, so House District 9, a seat that has been held by the Democrats my entire lifetime. I think maybe it's been held by the Democrats since it must be, since the 68 Constitution and the drawing of these sort of districts, which is a relatively new phenomenon in Florida. We had multi-member districts for years before that. We had members elected by county. So but in the modern constitutional history of Florida, this seat has always been held by Democrats. It is a Leon County-based seat. The incumbent Allison Tant, who is the former chair of the Florida Democratic Party, she's facing a stiffer challenge than she has in the past, but and the Republicans have been very bullish, I should say, on trying to win this seat. But it looks like Tant will hang on, maybe comfortably, based on what we're seeing.
I think so. Yes, they and there are some whispers around the state about why Allison Tant, seen as very strong, a prolific fundraiser, right down the middle of the district, and has a very good voting record. Enjoys a close relationship with her constituents, and she's known for spending a ton of time in Jefferson and in Madison counties. She's there. She's present. And of course has a great relationship with the donor class and the voters. And so she basically was not opposed last time. There's some talk around the state about efforts, the kind of deals get cut in legislative races and people agree to let others go unopposed. I think that there's been some talk that Democrats challenging Republicans downstate was one reason why some Republicans felt like they had been reneged against on some sort of handshake deal, and they said, okay, well, you know what, you're going to challenge us in 113, you're going to challenge us in South Florida races, how about this, we're going to give you a big run for Allison Tant's money. And so you got a Republican, a very callow, young, 20-something kind of guy from downstate in Pasco County, developer-oriented person, very close to a very noxious right-wing special interest in Tallahassee called Grow Tallahassee. Definitely the wrong crowd in terms of our domestic politics in here. Spencer Brass has been running a really nasty, negative, personalized race against Allison Tant, calling her a pervert, basically, saying that she's, saying that she is distorting her record, and she, everybody understands, is very, very mainstream. And so that originally, I think something like a seven-figure number was originally floated out there as something that was going to come in for Brass. It hasn't come close to that amount, but it probably has been $250,000. So we have seen a stiff challenge relatively, but I do not think that people are feeling excited on the Republican side about the status of this challenge. Brass has been basically absent from the field since debate season. You don't really see him around much. So I think that the opposition is ultimately going to end up being pretty token. However, you never know. It is the most Republican seat that's currently held by a Democrat in the state house, right? So it is somewhat marginal. There are seats that are more favorable that I think that we can flip. But in terms of who is a Democratic incumbent, this is the most vulnerable seat. They have put some pressure, but I agree from what I'm seeing so far and what the Allison Tant camp is projecting, they think that they'll win comfortably by at least a handful.
Okay, so that's great. Before we get out of here, we let you get back to campaigning. It is the day before the election. Tell us a little bit about the Tallahassee City Commission. It's arguably the most progressive big city commission in the state, and you have a critical commission race going on there as we speak.
This one just got more interesting, Kodak. Great question. Just the other day, from a partisan perspective, City Commissioner Curtis Richardson, who has been a Democrat who served on the school board for 8 years in the Florida House in House District 8, in Gadsden and South Tallahassee-based seat, where he was a somewhat reliable Democratic vote. Of course, would peel off and make deals with Republican leadership, but generally was known as a bog standard kind of Democrat. We have seen a challenge from Tallahassee's first black woman mayor, Dot Inman Johnson, who served from the mid-'80s into the mid-'90s on the city commission. She has made a return amid some really, really unpopular controversies involving Curtis Richardson's voting record. The infamous Doak Campbell Stadium renovations giveaway with our local sales tax agency Blueprint. Commissioner Richardson was a deciding vote on that. Very unpopular tax increases the last couple of years, including in 2023, 8.5% property tax hike. That was voted for by the establishment bloc in a 3-2 vote, where again Richardson was the deciding vote in raising taxes. That has not endeared him to his new sort of base, which has become whiter and more Republican in this race. So it has kind of been a Democratic versus Republican race. Dot Inman Johnson, the progressive challenger, who's endorsed by City Commissioners Jeremy Matlow, Jack Porter, and 65% of registered Democrats voted for her, according to an analysis that was done for our party. We have now seen in the 11th hour some more meat on the bone of it being a Republican versus Democratic proxy war. $40,000 has come into this race, and one of the very last days, October 15th, the Republican Party of Florida, RPOF itself, made through a pass-through a contribution of Curtis Richardson to Curtis Richardson's benefit of about $40,000 through the aforementioned Grow Tallahassee. So we have officially the party of Ron DeSantis has taken a side in this race, jumped in for Curtis Richardson, even accentuating even more the Republican versus Democratic ramifications of this race. It's going to be close. Richardson does have long-standing ties to a lot of institutions and a lot of name ID. But I think that if you look at a race where Dot comes into it with a 1,000 vote lead in August, where something like 57% of the voters voted against the incumbent, Commissioner Richardson, in August. And I think if you look at the demographics and the trends of the votes who are going to be in November that were not present in the environment in August, those are all very favorable signs for Dot Inman Johnson. A lot of people, I think most observers, think that Dot Inman Johnson is about to win tomorrow and usher in a very different majority on the city commission. You never know for sure, but I think that's the way that the winds look from here on the ground here in the capital city.
Great, Ryan. Thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you tomorrow. And good luck tomorrow.
Thanks for all the good work you're doing, Kartik. Appreciate you, and thanks a lot.